So Kavanaugh got confirmed on Saturday, and I think this means that we have averted a crisis both political and culturally in this country. I look back at the way that people were commenting on the Kavanaugh hearings after Ford put her testimony forward, and we were talking about ways that this was going to change the country, what this was going to mean for the country going forward if this stopped Kavanaugh, or just the fact that it was out there. I didn't like the direction that most of the people that were commenting on it were going with it, but I do understand the reasoning behind why they were commenting about it. That's why I say that we avoided a crisis culturally in this country, because the hearings went the way that they did and Kavanaugh was confirmed. But I do want to stand back and have a look at what this would have meant for the country going forward and the direction that a lot of people on the far right still want to take this country if they had their way because of this. Now, allegations of sexual misconduct against people that are conservative, especially, but against anybody who's really prominent in any other way, is absolutely nothing new in this country. This has been going on as long as we've had sexual crimes in this country, and it goes back even further than that. We can look at fictional accounts of allegations of sexual misconduct from times during the Jim Crow 60s and before. We can look at it in business, we can look at it in politics. It's even gone all the way to the top of our political sphere in this country. Judge Roy Moore of Alabama had allegations of sexual misconduct rallied against him after his primary but before the general election in Alabama. And while there was one allegation of something that wasn't completely consensual behind a restaurant in Alabama, everything else that was levied against him was something that was consensual. Because of the age difference, it was something that was creepy as hell, but it was consensual either way. And even our president has had allegations of misconduct levied against him because of things that he said on tape and because of things that he's done in his life. Unfortunately for him, everything else that's been levied against him has been completely consensual as well. It's been wrong because it's been outside the bonds of his marriage. He's cheated on every girl he's been with, and he's said outright that women will let him do whatever he wants because he's famous and because he's a star. The Stormy Daniels case comes to mind, and the Billy Bush tape comes to mind. But the fact of the matter is that everything else that's been brought forward against him has been consensual. The Kavanaugh case is different because that involved several allegations of things that were uncorroborable but were completely unconsensual. Now, there was no evidence for any of these, and as I've said numerous times on this video channel, I don't believe that we can deny him his ability to sit on the Supreme Court based on things that he can't be indicted for. Whether or not they happen, nobody will ever know, but we can't hang a guy for something that we can't prove that he did or didn't do. But throughout the entirety of this, a lot of people have said that the only way to effectively get people into government that aren't complete socialists, that aren't power grabbers, and people who they agree with generally, is for our side of the aisle at least, but for our entire country especially, to go back to a completely Victorian era. And that's an idea that I completely disagree with, especially as a free people in this country. Now, I respect the fact that Steve Crowder, Ben Shapiro, and Vice President Mike Pence are never going to have a sexual assault allegation levied against them, or any other sort of sexual misconduct allegations levied against them, because of the way that they've chosen to live their lives. Steve Crowder can make a lot of gay jokes, but he is admittedly a virgin until he was married. The same with Shapiro, and Pence hasn't expressly come out and said so, but it's heavily implied that he was. Pence's thing is that he goes out and says that he'll never be alone in a room with a woman who isn't his wife, and he won't drink alcohol with any woman who isn't his wife. These are really good things, and these make things a lot simpler for the people who are represented or the people who are fans of these said people. But what about the rest of us in this country? Now, we are a free people in this country, and as free people, we are entitled by our Creator, not our government, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life and liberty are pretty standard things, but pursuit of happiness is something that's going to be completely different to everybody in this country. And there are people in this country whose pursuit of happiness involves the company and intimacy sometimes of other people, sometimes multiple people. That's something that people enjoy. That is their pursuit of happiness. And as long as it's consensual between everybody out there and everybody who's involved in the situation, whether one other person or multiple other peoples, that's fine by them. They can pursue it however they wish. And I understand the fact that the Kavanaugh case is based on the fact that it was unconsensual contact between Kavanaugh and all of his accusers who could not bring forth evidence to deny him his seat. But what does that mean for the rest of us, especially the people, maybe not the people who consistently look for the intimacy of other people in their lives in order to pursue happiness, but the people who have pursued happiness that way in the past? I was having a conversation with a trucker one day in which I expressed my interest to run for Senate. I had been stifled with my interest prior because this coming election cycle, when I would be running, I didn't know where I was going to be living come November. And having a roof over my head was more important than running for my political aspirations. But the driver said something that rang true to me. He asked me if I'd ever been married, which I hadn't, or if I'd ever had any girlfriends previous to the one I have now, which I didn't have at the time. And I told him that, but I had had previous girlfriends. I've been engaged twice. And he told me that all of those girls are going to come out and say that something went wrong in our relationship. They're going to try and run my life into the ground, and if they can't do that, or if they're not willing to come forward by themselves, they're going to be enticed by the media to come out and do that for the Democrat Party or anybody else that I oppose. That's what I want to talk about today. The rhetoric out there is that we are supposed to believe all women no matter what. Whatever they say happened is what's supposed to have happened. And in the court of public opinion, that seems to be the case that's going on all over the place. A woman can go and have a completely consensual sexual encounter and not enjoy it or regret the person that she had it with, and she goes out and says instead that the person raped her, and now that person is going through a public opinion trial because there isn't any sort of evidence out there to make an indictment from that, because it was, in fact, a consensual sexual encounter. And that's what that driver was trying to warn me about when I had made my aspirations clear that this is what I wanted to do with my life. And after seeing the entire Kavanaugh case, I can't deny that that's probably what would have happened to me had I run. And that leaves us in an awkward situation in this country. Yes, obviously, it would be better if we were back in that Victorian era and nobody could make an accusation against anybody because nobody was doing anything that warranted any sort of accusation. But we grew up in the 90s when that wasn't really the world that we were presented, and we were expected to act a certain way and do certain things at certain times in our lives. We watched Charlie Sheen take a different girl to bed every episode for 8 seasons, and we watched Joey and we watched Barney Stinson do the same thing. We watched soap operas where people were changing partners faster than square dancers do. Both soap operas that were designed for our parents and soap operas that were designed for us as young adults. Yes, there were people like Pence and Shapiro and Crowder who were able to resist the call to what our society was trying to have us do, but they are in the minority in our society right now, and to be completely honest, because they're in the minority like that, they don't really represent us. Now, they say that Generation Z is going to be the most conservative generation of our lifetimes. I'd like to talk about that in another video because I see a lot of that as being true, and I can see some merit to that. But between the Boomer generation and Generation X dying off, and getting Generation Z up to where they can start running for offices and not have to worry about any sort of allegation out there, we have a time frame in which we as millennials, who have already done the deeds that we needed to do in our lives, who have already have a past behind us and who didn't always necessarily wait until we got married, we have a generation of us who is not going to be represented if we're all held to this high standard. One of the things that's come out of these Kavanaugh hearings is a cementing of the idea in the minds of the American people that they can't run for anything or they can't be appointed for anything, any office that's anywhere in the public sphere, because they've got too much baggage behind them. I mean, Kavanaugh didn't really have any actual baggage behind him as far as we know, because there's nothing that we can indict him on, and yet he was still nearly denied his ability to serve out his appointment from our president, who had a constitutional right to appoint him. And this is going to keep people, good people, from even attempting to go and run for any sort of political office out there. I know that my ex-fiance would love to take a couple of shots at me if I ever got into the public eye. And even if she didn't come out and directly do it, I'm sure that the Journal-Sentinel would be out there trying to find her and begging her for information on what I did when I was 19, 20, and 21. And that's the thing that we need to do when we start looking at public life and the way that we structure our government that is by the people, for the people, going forward. I've mentioned it before, we are in a crowdfunding age, and people can go out and raise the money on their own to run for an office somewhere, rather than having a corporate donor or a government donor or the party of their choice behind them giving them money to go and run for an office. They can get money from the people to run. But we need to be able to support these people no matter what kind of baggage comes out about them, especially if they have ideas that are good and that align with our beliefs. We can stand up and rally for the everymen, the people that will actually represent us, the people that have been through the same experiences as us, the people that have done the same things as us. We can stand up and rally for them, support them, give them our hard-earned money, and try to get them into office to represent us and to break the stigma that you have to be preened and primped from birth to be in an office anywhere in this country. Or we can accept the Victorian standard out there, that there are so many commenters out there that believe that we need to accept in order to get any sort of person into the government that represents us. And then we need to sit back and accept the fact that even though our documents say that our government is by the people, for the people, we need to sit back and accept the fact that we will be ruled by a ruling class. And that is not something that I am willing to accept in a free nation. What do you think about the societal impact of the Kavanaugh hearings? What do you think about the fact that he's been confirmed? And what do you think about what this means for anybody else who wants to run for a public office? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comments section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.